Okay, well, go ahead and read,
Okay.
go ahead and read your change.
All right, okay. So this is my remarks why I was stating I was voting against. There's just a typo. It has the word, he feels like he and the other members have not had the opportunity to vet, V-E-T, the number sufficiently. That word should be vet. That word should be vet. V is in Victor, E-T. So that's all. It does make the my reasoning seem a little more logical. That's the only change I had. So
Is that change noted, Sherry?
Right. So you would first and second on with the amendments.
All right.
Or with the amendment.
Do you want to amend yours?
Yeah,
Amend your second with the.
Just approve the minutes with the amendment noted.
yes.
All right. All those in favor of approving the motion with the amended change, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I do want to mention for the record that we do have 4 members of the committee excused today, but we do have a quorum, and should we vote, we need a unanimous vote on whatever issue it is. Next, public comment.
Mark Mucher, 617 in Lilac Road. Not too clear what y'all are going to be able to do today with this small group, but I wanted to set the tone a little bit by bringing up the issue of the closing of Big Blue. There's all kinds of information about the air quotes savings, but I never see any mention of the costs, even in your financial analysis. I know that you're going to start paying $3.5 million a year for gas or for power that you weren't buying before. So whether you save 2.3 million or some other number that's been bandied about, that you're at a loss to begin with. So I'm very interested in a complete financial analysis from both the savings and the cost side, and also how that's going to affect rates.
Well, Mark, so are we, and hopefully we'll get an enlightenment on that today.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments from the public? If not, I'll close public comment, and we'll go to new business. The first being a discussion regarding customer service technology upgrades, process improvements. And that would be presented by?
Your finance director, Cynthia Lawson.
Right.
This is really an informational item and one that I'm hoping we can just have some conversation about. In October, the council asked for an update on where we stood in our progress towards some technology improvements and some changes within customer service and IT. And some of this are, well, actually all of it are things that we actually began discussing with the Finance Commission and I think with you, Utility Commission, back in February of 2014 and then again in June of 2015 as we did that SWOT analysis of potential rate reductions and things that we might do to improve the efficiency of the electric utility, of which customer service is a big part. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk through the phases that we're contemplating, what we have finished, what we're starting right now, and where we look to be in a couple of years, and just talk about some of our customer service offerings. The white paper kind of speaks for itself, so I'll touch on it lightly, but certainly as we move through this, if you have questions or issues or things you'd like for us to explore further, feel free to interrupt me and let's have that conversation. I think the first part of this paper is to clarify what we already have in place. We do have a variety of options for customers, currently have a variety of options for customers to pay their utility bills. And one of them is by credit card. This is provided through a third-party service, but if you look, and I've included some screenshots here just for clarification, If you look on the city's homepage, just there in the bottom left corner, you'll see a picture of a credit card and it says online utility payment. If you click there, it will take you to our third-party providers portal where you can make your utility bill payments by credit card or debit card. There is a small processing fee. However, that wouldn't change if the city was doing it because, again, we get charged by the credit card companies, and therefore there needs to be a small processing fee or our revenue comes out net negative when we collect your bill. So that's available through the city's website right now. We also have in our drop-down menu from the homepage, which I've included here, you go to customer service and then utility payment options. It outlines the variety of ways you can pay your bill, not just in person or by mail, but as we just talked about, by credit or debit card on the internet, also by credit or debit card by phone. You can set up electronic funds transfers, and in doing so, you can also avail yourselves of budget billing. So the city already has in place, through a third-party provider, a number of the things that we're striving to provide ourselves, but they are already available to our customers. So right now, you can also pay in person at the city's customer service lobby. We have a walk-in and a drive-through open from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, both our cashiers and our customer service representatives. And that is a fairly extensive coverage of your ability to come into our lobby, pay your bill, talk to a customer service representative, and work out any of the issues that you have. And that's something that we're going to talk about as we move through these proposed process improvements. One of the things that we've included, and we did it last year and we've updated it, and you notice it really hasn't changed much, just to put a context on the conversation, is attachment C, which you might want to pull out to the side there, that shows you by transaction type what our volume of transaction processing is on a monthly basis. And as you can see, our average monthly volume in 2013, that's calendar year, really didn't change much coming into 2014. And so I want to talk about each of these methods by which we receive payments and talk about how these process improvements we're proposing impact those pieces of traffic through our cashier system. We're taking kind of a phased approach to our customer service upgrades and our process improvements, particularly on the technology side. The first and very important phase was to actually update our utility billing software that we have through Cayenta to bring it up from 10 years and 10 versions out of date. And as you might imagine...
Can I ask how that could have happened?
Well, I'm not sure. I wasn't here all 10 of those years. I will tell you because
usually the vendor requires you to do it, otherwise they cut off their support to your software.
Our vendor has been very understanding. Their support has been we laughed a little. It's been a lot faster in the last month or so since we did this, because before, I think when we called them, they would kind of pass the phone around and go, you deal with these people that are on 10 versions ago. Right. But, they've always been very accommodating to us. The other thing about our software, because it was so old and out of date, is every time we wanted it to do something, fairly modern and standard, we would actually have to pay them to create custom routines. And so I think, to be honest with you, I don't know how it happened for the first 6 years. Since I've been here, in the very first year that I was here, we were busy working to transition our billing data as a consequence of the sale. And so at that point, this was a fairly expensive proposition to upgrade it. There didn't seem to be a point in upgrading it at that point. But once we realized it was now another 3 years gone and it was really time to do it, we knuckled under and did it. This is one of those things when we talked about it last year, I said, if we do this right, nobody will ever know it happened. And guess what? Apparently we did, because it's already been done. We went live back on 25th of September. Everything went smooth. We had one day where we closed the customer service lobby on a Friday for our go live weekend. We noticed that for a month ahead of time, and we also basically treated that as a non-day. So people that had cutoff dates that day were moved to Monday. We did everything we could to accommodate our customers and really didn't have any complaints. We went live over that weekend. Come Monday, we were producing bills as usual. We've had a couple of little wrinkles, and lingering tickets to iron out, but none of them have affected people's bills. And so nobody knew it, and that was our goal. So that system has been upgraded and is currently functioning smoothly. And we've been through a whole month's worth of billing cycle, and everything appears to be fine. So,
okay. And now the policy going forward is we'll hit every upgrade on time?
Absolutely. for a number of reasons. I will tell you, this is a process that took, as you might imagine, I don't know if you just upgrade the Windows operating system on your home computer. Now try 10 years and 10 versions out of date on something that handles 33,000 bills a month. It was a good solid 6 months, and I have to take this opportunity to say I can't say enough about my customer service management and my IT people who undertook this huge task with our vendor, because it was quite the thing. So, but it's done, and it actually. We had talked about some of these other things and doing them first. It turns out, after consulting with both our billing software provider and our banking services provider, they all agreed that the right way to do this was to fix the utility billing software, create that foundation. A lot of the functionality that we need for these other improvements is in the current version of the software. So there was no reason, again, to write special routines and then upgrade the software and have those special routines not need to be there anymore. So this essentially provides the foundation for all the other things that we want to do. And yes, I at least am absolutely committed to staying up to date on upgrades as they come to pass, and not ever letting it get to this situation again, because it was a little bit nerve-wracking. So the next upgrade that we're talking about, the next two upgrades that we're talking about, and we're actually going to have a team meeting with the people involved in January, is two things that are actually provided by our banking services provider, Wells Fargo. One is called eBox, and one is called Lockbox. And let's talk about both. eBox provides electronic bank-to-bank capture of bills that are paid through other people's banks. You sit down with your own bank's bill pay service, you fill in City of Vero Beach Electric, you hit the button, and I think a lot of people assume that what that means is that the electrons go winging over to our bank and your bill gets paid. Unfortunately, because of that we don't have the technology in place at this point, what actually happens for most banks is your bank produces a paper check, and that paper check gets mailed to our cashier department. On the average, we have 6,500 of these or so a month, 6,500 to 6,900. That's what you see with hand key mail. And those checks, in terms of processing, are actually worse than a check that somebody mails in with a coupon, because they come with no coupon, frequently with no account number, and those are very, very labor intensive. What also happens is, because you've hit bill pay at your bank with a couple of days to go with your bill due, you're assuming that your bill is paid on time. What frequently happens is, because those checks have to be printed, mailed by your bank, received by us, and hand processed, people miss due dates when they never would have imagined that they would have, because they've done an electronic payment. So the first thing that we want to do is eBox, which does away with all those 95% of those hand key checks, the 6,000 or 7,000 hand key checks, and also increases the time of our capture so that there really is a bank-to-bank electronic transaction that happens when you do bill pay with your bank. And that would eliminate, we think, as I said, about 95% of these hand key payments, to the tune of about 7,000 of them a month. That one
Cindy,
sure.
As a customer, I'm one of those that I pay electronically, but it sends you a paper check. Is there anything that we do as a customer when you make that change?
No. This is, again, these two things here, again, if we do them properly, will be completely transparent.
I don't even know it's happening.
You won't even know it's happening. The only people that it will affect are the people that, unfortunately, have late payments because they assumed it was electronic and it's not. So there will be a positive impact, if anything, on people, because those payments will be made same day, essentially, and not, through a paper check that wings its way through the process when that person didn't know that was happening. So that one will be transparent and an improvement, both back of the house for us and in the quickness with which we get those kinds of payments. That one is really cost effective. Essentially, at the bottom, you see a little cost benefit analysis for the net monthly fees, et cetera. The net annual fees for doing eBox are a little over $4,000, and we anticipate that all by itself will eliminate one part-time cashier. That's 7,000 pieces of mail that don't have to be processed back of the house, for a $14,000 savings. So the net benefit of doing eBox is $10,000 a year. That one's easy. The next one is Lockbox services, and I believe there are a couple other utilities locally that do this. Essentially what happens is the bank creates a virtual P.O. box, and instead of all those mailed payments coming to the city, to the cashiers in the back of the house here, they go to a back of the house processing center at Wells Fargo Bank. They process the payments. They electronically transmit the day's receipts to our billing system, and there's a portal by which they can identify exceptions. And so the only involvement of my cashiers is the daily exception report. In other words, they go and clear ones where, the account number that was written on the check is different from what's on the coupon. Any little, the normal stuff that comes up, coupons without checks, checks without coupons, those kinds of things. So what we're talking about here is the scannable mail, and we're talking about 11 to 12,000 transactions a month, 11 to 12,000 pieces of mail per month that would no longer be handled here at the city by our cashiers. That one, and it would probably eliminate the other 5% of the hand key mail as well. That is huge for us. Now, in terms of net costs, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it may end up netting an additional cost to the utility of about $39,000 a year, but what it does for us is it absolutely makes us more efficient. It impacts other departments right now, this mail processing, whether it be the person that actually goes to the bank a couple of times for the mail, whether it be customer service people or even IT people that pitch in some time to get bills ready to be scanned because of the volume on certain days. And the other thing is I just will tell you, I've had a lot of turnover in the cashiering department, and it's constant, and I don't see that really ever changing for a variety of reasons. When you do lockbox with Wells Fargo, it doesn't matter whether people take a vacation or they're sick or they go take another job. They're there every day providing the service consistently and reliably. And so even if it doesn't lead us to a reduction in the number of cashiers, which we'll talk about in a minute, I would strongly recommend that we do this. Going forward, this is reliable, efficient, will impact other departments in a variety of ways, and relatively inexpensive, taken in the context of a $90 million utility as a whole. So,
okay, maybe you're going to talk about that. I'm puzzled why we don't save money, or at the very least, reduce the charge back to the utility fund if these. The indication I got, and correct me if I'm wrong in here, was these cashiers and other people do other things, then our charge back should be reduced from the general fund on the administrative charge, which is huge, to the utility. That should be reduced back if we're spending $49,000. So well, I'm confused by it.
Well, and that's a great segue into the rest of the conversation. Right. Although e-Box and Lockbox will substantially reduce the back-of-the-house workload for those cashiers, and e-Box will eliminate one, so that will actually net some savings to the electric utility. We've discussed this on numerous occasions, and I don't think you were here last year when we had this discussion. Unless we reduce or eliminate our drive-through or lobby window hours, I can't get rid of any more people, because if a window is open, there has to be someone in that window to service a customer, whether it's 2 an hour or 20 an hour. The difference is that right now they sit in those windows, serve customers as they come, and when the customers aren't there, they turn their attention to back-of-the-house processing. But even with the back-of-the-house processing gone, if we keep 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, all day long, drive-through and lobby hours, I need a certain minimum number of people for coverage for that. Every time that we've talked about either, one of my proposals during a budget season a couple of years ago was to eliminate the drive-through window. People can use the drop box. If it got in the drop box before a certain time of day, it'd be posted that day, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody was interested in doing that. Limiting the lobby hours. Unfortunately, that one, if I limit the cashier hours, I probably really have to limit the customer service hours too, because all I'm going to create is massive frustration. If people are able to come and see a customer service person, then they can't turn around and come to the cashier window. So right now, you have the lobby open and you have the drive-through open. How many people are covering that? I have right now I have 3 full-time cashiers and 3 part-time. And with e-Box, we would have 3 full-time cashiers and 2 part-time.
But right at this moment, how many people do you have?
3. Well, I have positions for 3 and 3. I have 3 and 3 right this second, I think.
Okay, I'm not asking the question the right way. for covering the lobby and the drive-through right at this very moment, how many people are in there? Three people?
Full-time. I have 3 full-time cashiers and 3 part-time cashiers, but people take vacations, people are sick, the part-timers only work,
so
like
you have at least 2 or 3 people in there right now?
Absolutely. Probably 4. We have 2 drive-through windows. We have 2 windows, and we have a supervisor who does all the back of the house and does the bank runs. So again, the real conversation that we've been having for like a year or so, and I want to have it again. How much is it worth to us as a utility to have that much availability of cashiers? Right now, you can come into the lobby at 5 minutes of 5, pay your past due bill, and get yourself off the cutoff list for that night. We are the most extremely customer friendly and accommodating and open all day customer service function that you can imagine. And that's great, and people love it. But it does come at a price. And so really that's the conversation we've been having back and forth for the last year. If we want lower cashiering costs, we have to reduce cashiering hours. I can't run 2 drive-through windows, 2 lobby windows, 8:30 to 5, no lunch break, every day with a couple of people. It can't be done. Someone has to be in those windows to service customers when they walk up, and that's just a fact.
That's interesting because I use the drive-through at times, and I have to wait. I've waited 5 or 10 minutes, and
Depends
there's
on
no problem.
Depends on when you come. Yeah. But again, if people are willing to accept that, we can do it. But so far in our conversations, starting with the very first budget season where I proposed to eliminate the drive-through entirely, both the Finance and Utility Commission and the City Council have said they don't want to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is, and we'll talk about this next phase too, which may affect that. Let's do the lockbox for all the other good and valid reasons, which is reliability, efficiency. Let's see what falls out of that. Because again, until we do it, we can't really know how it's going to impact anyway. And then as we do these other things, we need to do it in conjunction with a conversation about how much live customer service and cashier support people really need. In talking about the next phase, which is really a couple of years down the road, a utility website where people could do things like start and stop service and set up their own EFTs and set up their own budget billing would eliminate so many of the things that people physically have to come. Because remember, the cashiers are on one side and the customer service people are right here. So many of those things, people physically have to come to our customer service lobby to do them. They cannot be done on a website or by phone at this point. So if we move into that phase where we create a really good user-friendly website, my proposal is that if we do that, if we create all these other ways for people to get their needs met without face-to-face interaction, we will see fairly quickly if we can drive the demographic, or if the demographic is there, so that we cut down all the a good chunk of the foot traffic in the lobby. Mm-hmm. Until we actually do it and incentivize it, it's going to be hard to say how it impacts us. But logic would dictate that I think there are a lot of people who would much prefer to do these things at home with coffee on a Saturday morning in front of their computer than come to our customer service lobby and sit there. At least I would hope so. And so, the move is toward a couple of years down the road creating a situation where people can get all their needs met without coming to see us. And if that pans out, then beginning slowly to dial back the hours. And we really need to dial back the customer service hours at the same time as the cashier hours, because I believe we're going to create a situation with a lot of frustration if people come in and see customer service and then the cashier windows are closed. So, that's just a conversation we need to keep having, I think. There are lots of things we could do with such a website. I will tell you, and it says so in here, that will be expensive. And that's probably just an estimate, to create that kind of a customer web service portal. But if we can, as we move toward that a couple of years from now, talk about the costs and start to get a feel for how much more of the customer service transactions it may eliminate from face-to-face, day-to-day, we could get a better feel for whether that we think that's going to be cost-effective.
Isn't there going to be at some point an irreducible minimum of people who don't have internet access and don't have electronic fund transfer capable and that kind of stuff, where they just come into your lobby and pay?
There is. I will tell you, there are utilities that have no live customer service locations. And people are forced to adapt. Do we want to be that utility? The feedback that I've gotten up to this point in time is no, we don't want to be that utility. We want to still enable our customers to be able to come and sit down face to face with someone who can help them with their problem. But certainly the business model for other utilities is there is no live customer service location, and you do what you have to do by phone or by internet. And again, I hear what you're saying. I think we do have a certain number of our customers who either don't have that access or don't want to use that access, that would much prefer a live person. It's a question of our demographic.
Cindy, excuse me, do you have a head count on that number of how many people computer access versus traditional methods?
Well, you can kind of, if you look at how many people walk into our lobby and come through our drive-through right now, you probably get a good feel for what that percentage is. And again, because this isn't customer service transactions, this is purely cashiering. And so on a monthly basis, we have about 8,000 people that either walk into our lobby to pay or drive through our drive-through window to pay, which runs about 22% of our total transactions. And so I would say there's probably a good percentage of that percentage that even if they had the ability not to, if it was still an option, would come through the drive-through window or come into the lobby. Whether it be because, they're getting there just short of a cutoff, or whether it's just something that's part of their routine, or whether they don't have internet access, that's a pretty hefty percentage, a pretty large number of people that use our lobby and our drive-through. And again, you can see the drive-through is like 3,000 people. When we proposed to shut off the drive-through, it didn't meet with a lot of support from 3,000 people who, for various reasons, can't get out and come into the lobby or just choose to use the drive-through. So, but again, we're open. It's just that as we've had this conversation for the last couple of years, we've sort of always leaned in the direction of being that more responsive customer service, which just requires people.
Cindy, is it true? I want to understand, like, for a customer to take advantage of any kind of breaks in the rate, they have no way to do that currently, right? To understand if their usage is reaching a break point without. Do they?
Well, the break point is 1,000 kilowatt hours. I mean, they have their bill.
But that's after the fact.
That's after the fact.
So there's no way for them to live know if they're, how to monitor or how to do more energy conservation until we have a website. Is that correct?
Well, there's a couple of things involved in that. On the bill itself, you've seen it. You see your usage last month, your usage a year ago on the same month. So, just from your bill, you can get a historical perspective on whether this December is way up over last year and what the average, daily use is. As far as live monitoring, unfortunately, that really requires smart meters, and that's not a direction that this utility has proposed to go. To really live monitor your usage requires smart meters.
Okay, so that's not even in the cards, like 2 years out.
No. As far as home energy audits, we respond right now on a on request basis for somebody who's actually having a problem. And if someone sees their bill shoot up, we will send someone out, usually from the TED shop, from the meter shop, or from customer service, to have a look and see if we can figure out whether it's a fuse in their water heater or what kind of issue they're having. But it's really complaint driven. One of the things we have talked about doing, and we had it a few years ago, but when we were downsizing, we eliminated it, is having a bit more proactive sort of home energy audit available to people to really go out and look at people's houses, talk about insulation and energy efficient appliances and things like that. But that is not something that we have right now. It is something that I think we're proposing to reinstate in the near future.
And so through this website in the future, would we be able to educate customers about how they can pitch in to help reduce the peak by just adjusting when they do, big energy usage? Some of that could be adjusted just through education, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And a website like this that was dedicated to our utility, that would be an excellent use of that website, just tips and tricks for homeowners and
and then there's the water usage, which also has breakpoints, right?
Mm-hmm.
for irrigation and so forth.
Right. So yeah, customer education is a huge part of it. And again, we do what we can. There are sometimes mailers within the bills and things, but not to any huge degree. And certainly as we move to try to peak shave, one of the things that would behoove us to do is to start to educate our customers on what's available to them in that regard.
And then what about these incentives? How would you incentivize people to use this new electronic access? I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, to incentive.
EFTs, that's just signing up for automatic bank drafts every month. What I've seen and we get about 6,200 of those. Those are just one of the absolutely easiest ways for us to ensure collectability and get our bills paid every month. I have seen, the question mark is, I've seen other utilities that will actually waive residential deposits if you sign up for EFT when you start your service. Because, clearly, if you've set up for an automatic bank draft, we're going to be receiving the money. And then certainly if you ever have one of those EFTs bounce, we reinstate your deposit, et cetera. But, there are ways, I think, to incentivize that sign up at the initiation of service that I'd like to explore. The residential deposit is what I think $200 right now, so that's a fairly good incentive, and kind of increase that number if we can. One of the things we also would like to do is add. When we do the lockbox, we can add the ability to pay by credit card to the bill coupon itself. You've seen those when you get bills from doctor's offices or the little OCR thing down there, and you can write your credit card number in. We're planning to incorporate that into the coupons so that we can do it that way.
How about automatically debiting from credit cards or bank accounts?
That's the EFT. We get about 6,200 of those a month right now, and that's where we're saying, when people sign up for service, if we told them we'd waive their deposit if they signed up for automatic debits right there, maybe that'd be a way to increase that number. The other little things, it just says other improvements. I know this probably sounds a little bit silly, but back when we were talking about this last year, if you ever went in the customer service cashier lobby, it was sort of a big undifferentiated mass, and it just creates a little anxiety for people, particularly when you have people jump in lines, et cetera. So we got some of those movie theater ropes and created a little queue for the cashier windows, and it has actually really helped. It's a simple thing that helped create a little bit of order. I guess people just like that feeling of knowing, I'm next in line and there's no way that this mass of people, someone's going to emerge from it and get in front of me. We also have budgeted for 15-16 to put in, again, I know this sounds a little silly, but I think it's useful, a little flat screen TV in the corner there where we can put customer information messages. Judy, some of the things you were just talking about. And not just for the electric utility, but also water and sewer,
right.
Water quality, closures of things, upcoming, like we had the closure of the lobby, holidays, and conservation, information, and let that run on a continuous loop in the lobby. And then also maybe just a little paint and a couple things in there to make it, slightly better environment for our customers. And then finally, we're getting ready to start up our rate study again. We did that, I think it was March or April. We talked about it with this commission. We did it partway, and then we sort of set it to the side as we took up the question of the OUC purchase power amendments. Now that revised contract has been signed and we have numbers there in conjunction with the numbers we're going to talk about in a minute for the closing of the plant, we're going to reinvigorate that rate study and take it all the way through and get it filed. And one of the things we're doing in that rate study is looking at the fees that we charge for various things, connects, disconnects. And although our fees at this point appear to be fairly consistent with the other utilities in our area, we would like to maybe keep the same fees but change some of the policies to incentivize slightly different behavior. In other words, move back the cutoff time for same-day service. You can't come until 5 o'clock and be reinstated today. You can come until 2 o'clock for a certain amount of money to be reinstated today. And then after 2 o'clock, it's going to cost you a premium or 3 or whatever it is, because after a certain time of day, then it means that we have to send out people on an overtime basis to deal with stuff as opposed to, true same day at straight time. So we're going to look at all those fees and incentives as part of our rate study to try to see if we can't, again, shift behavior a little bit to make it more cost efficient for us as we charge people. So,
Mark, did you want to send you?
Mark Mucher again. Going way back to the billing and cashiers issue and things like that, I don't want to give the impression that I do everything right and you all do everything wrong, but we've got just 4 rather hopefully astute people up there, and one of them goes to the drive-through, and the other sends a paper check, and I don't know what the other two do. But I've done the EFT for probably 25 years, or as long as it's available. It's probably not promoted very well, but obviously that's the cheapest and easiest. To answer your question, Jack, about who doesn't have internet, it really doesn't matter if they don't have internet. A better question, I think, would be how many people pay cash, because those are the conspiracy theorists that aren't going to give you permission to take money out of your checkbook, because the bill's going to get paid anyway, and if there's a mistake, and I don't imagine there are that many mistakes, that's something that people can deal with, but it's far easier for both the customer and the utility to have the money taken directly out of your bank account. I still get an envelope to send my check in, but that's just a small irritation. And like I say, you got to pay it. You don't have to worry about running up against a deadline. You don't have to worry about paying too easy or too early. It's just a lot easier for everybody. But I think the key is in the education and letting people know that that's available, and the fact that it is easy and helps everybody out. So maybe just a little bit of education or promotion in that direction could smooth a lot of these things out. And like I say, the only people that really wouldn't benefit were the people that pay cash for whatever reason.
Which we do have, a fair number of people that do. But I agree. I mean, an incentive of waiving a deposit, and also, we do, as people come and sign up for service, because they have to come and sign up in person. Obviously, our customer service representatives provide them with the option for an EFT right there. But yeah, I think that incentive could be helpful.
Your long-term customers may not know it's even available.
Possibly.
The ones who've lived here a long time.
Possibly.
But it's not paperless.
The EFT is paperless.
It is paperless. You don't even get a bill.
It's the online bill pay at your bank that comes as a paper check to us. If you have Seacoast and you sit down and do the online bill pay, it actually produces a paper check that is mailed to us as opposed to coming. That's what eBox will fix.
Right, but the customer doesn't even receive a bill.
The customer, you get a bill.
Okay.
It shows the amount. Yeah, it shows the amount and the draft date that the amount's going to come out of your checking account. So you do still receive a bill.
So it's not paperless.
No. And then again, you get to this phase 3, you get to the place where you have a fairly sophisticated website, and you can make it paperless. Paperless billing is another option that people can choose. And again, that would be a cost savings as well. But the issue. The question really is, as we move in that direction and do so slowly, where are we going to meet that resistance from people who really just, like to see people and don't want to interact with websites? And I think that over the course of time, we can educate people, incentivize people, change the demographic, and achieve over time some real reductions in costs. But it's going to take some time. I've seen customer service websites where, for instance, you can go look at a illustrative bill, and as you mouse over different sections of the bill, you get a pop-up that shows you, okay, this is what this means to you, and here's where you look for this amount, and this is what this means. Things like that are really, really helpful and really could potentially cut down on customer service interaction. However, websites like that are not inexpensive to create or maintain. So, yeah, I think that was going to have to really pan out as a cost savings to be worthwhile. Other than that, any other questions?
Are there any other questions from the?
Anything you want to add to that? Or?
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to add is that if the Utility Commission could maybe take a vote, or at least consensus, that we're following in the right direction, because the same presentation will be made to the Council. And I'd just like to make sure that when we say the Utility Commission heard the presentation, there were no objections to the process that we're following. And, as Cindy said, one of those has a cost that we will be incurring before we can try to address the hours at the customer service, which is where the numbers may come down and pay for that $39,000.
Specifically, and thank you for that. Specifically, the next thing we plan to do is the e-box and the lockbox. We wouldn't move on to the website until we had, in a year or so from now, we had another one of these meetings and a real vetting of those costs. But are you okay as a whole with us continuing to implement e-box and lockbox?
I would make a motion that we endorse the finance director's moves toward implementing e-box and lockbox.
I'll
Second?
second that.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Next on our agenda, we have the cost analysis of the electric utility operating cost savings from closure of the power plant. Jim, are you going to do that, or Cindy? You?
I was going to start, and then I've got
Oh, okay.
Ted and the city manager both here to
It's a
jump
team
in.
effort. That's fine.
We got the actual people who are going to be doing
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So I'll set the framework for this. Back in October, when you saw a presentation from Mr. Wright regarding the savings attributable to the revised purchase power agreement, inherent in that, included in that, were estimated savings for both 15, 16, and then going forward for closing the power plant. That was part and parcel of that analysis. Okay, and so within that cost analysis, the projected savings for the shutting down of the power plant were a phased shutdown in 15-16, with the full cost savings realized beginning October the 1st of 2016, 17, and going forward. And so what we've done is attach those documents unchanged from what was incorporated in the analysis that Mr. Wright provided you when you made that decision, showing a comparison of the Power Resources Department budget for 15-16 versus the phased shutdown, the non-departmental costs and transfers versus the phased shutdown in 15-16, and then probably most importantly, our rate consultant's summary of the cost per kilowatt hour for the city's non-fuel production and distribution and administration costs for 15-16 and for those next 9 fiscal years after we realize the full shutdown of the plant. And we'll look at that one in a moment because I think that goes back to Mr. Moocher's question. The thing I want you to note is that back when we did this analysis assumed that we'd have a partial plant shutdown on December 1st of 2015 and would achieve the full shutdown by July 1st of 2016. Based on everything that's happened, and something happens every day, it looks as though we can achieve that sooner. And what that means is that the full cost savings would be realized sooner. In other words, the 15-16 ramp down would be faster. The cost savings may be faster in 15-16. But ultimately, when we get to 16-17, we're still moving forward predicated on it being fully shut down. So it doesn't really change it so much as potentially slightly accelerate the savings. What we're doing right now is, as we just talked about restarting up the rate study, is as we move through the next 3 or 4 months, working through the details of personnel actions and regulatory actions, et cetera, we will incorporate the real revised costs into the rate study so that when the rate study comes forward in the end of first quarter next year, middle of next year, it'll have the reality of what has happened incorporated in it. But in the meantime, all we have is the analysis we've done and the things that we're doing right now to try to move faster than that. So if anything, this is sort of like the most conservative scenario, and the chances are good it will actually be realized more quickly than that. But one of the things that I guess has come up a couple of times and I want to make clear is when we did this analysis, we did include assumptions regarding payout of accumulated leave balances to those people who are eligible if they separate. We know what their accumulated leave balances are right now, and those were included in this analysis. Some of the residual fixed costs that we're going to have associated with pension liabilities and employees that may be retained going into the future, and also the elimination of some of the capital and repair and maintenance expenditures for plant maintenance and improvements. Those are all, and many more things, are a function of, they're included in this analysis. We have kind of 2 categories of costs here. This speaks to the ongoing operating costs. How much will we save in ongoing operating costs once we fully shut it down, fold it into all of the costs of purchase power that result in an overall net rate change. And that's what you discussed with Mr. Wright and Mr. Harrington. But the further question is, when you shut down the plant, what manner do you do it in, and what are the one-time costs and revenues associated with that? So this speaks to the ongoing operating costs and the impact on rates on an ongoing basis. But the whole other topic that Ted is and Jim are prepared to start speaking to as well is, what about the one-time costs? There's a big difference between just shutting down the plant and mothballing it versus actually tearing it down and all points in between. So they're really two separate things. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. The rest of the team is here to tell you what's actually going on right now, et cetera.
Okay. With regard to the sheet, doesn't have a page, but there's a base case and revised scenario. The sheet here, it says, I guess it's Department 5,000 Power Resources. It says on the bottom we have a reduction of $235,000 transfer to Fund 405. What is Fund 405?
Fund 405 is the fund that does repairs and maintenance, boiler repairs and maintenance and such. It's just another sub-fund of the electric utility.
Okay.
And that's part of the overall reduction of $800,000, primarily personnel costs and that transfer to R&M. Again, in the subsequent fiscal year, the subsequent full fiscal year, that would be eliminated completely. This is the phase-down year.
Okay. Yeah. Understood. Has the utility director or the finance director started to put any scenario analysis together of potential costs regarding tearing down the plant so that the property could be reused and not sit there forever?
What I like to do, I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll present to you, and then you can make your choice of how you want to move forward.
Okay.
So I have that available today.
All right.
Ted, why don't you proceed with it?
Is Holt back there?
It should be on.
There you are.
Yeah, just forward, backwards. That's
Where's forward?
That goes forward, that goes backwards.
Okay, cool. This on? Okay, what are the possible options available after shutting down generation units? It's kind of an overview. Option 1, keep all transmission and distribution facilities within the building. Option 2, construct a new control house on the existing site and proceed with demolition of the building. Option 3, relocate all transmission and distribution facilities to another site. So here's option 1, where it shows your distribution and your transmission. And this is where we talk about keeping all the transmission and distribution facilities within the building.
I'm sorry, a little confused by that. We say within the building. It's not physically in the building. It's out in the...
Let me go back. All of the 69 and all of the 13 transmission distribution, a lot of the switchgear, all that facilities are located within inside the building. All your DC circuitry and all that.
Okay. All right. So it connects into this equipment outside? It
connects into that distribution transformers and then your ring bus.
Okay.
Okay. Here I'd like to, this talks about starting a process to sell all the available assets, such as generating units, turbines, pumps, motors, etc. That estimated value of $800,000. And also in option 1, we would be removing all the hazardous chemicals, cooling tower off the riverfront, fill that in, move all the oil out of the tanks and the oil in the lines. Close out all the DEP and EPA permits.
So just on that part about removing all that stuff, so do you mean it would be like grass when you're finished?
It would be. I mean, that's.
So all those tanks disappear, and
all the tanks disappear. All of the cooling tower and all that would disappear
and be cleaned up.
That's correct.
Assuming it has to be, right?
Right.
Okay. And then you would end up with a clean slate to do whatever. Building's still there, just
Yeah,
takes care
it
of
all
the
depends.
back.
That's why I'm presenting three options. It kind of shows what you want to do is immediate cost savings for option 1, and option 2, and then option 3. Here's option 2, where I talk about constructing a new control house on the existing site. Now, if you remember back that slide previously where we looked at the transmission and distribution ring bus, you would have something similar to this with a control house. So it would be a substation on the same site of the plant.
Okay.
Right up front where that existed, where I showed the transmission and distribution ring bus. So in option 2, where we talk about building that switch yard, the control house is approximately 30 by 70. And to do that, to accommodate moving everything from within inside the plant out to a new switch yard, is an estimated value of $3.5 million. And at that point, you have the whole building to start selling off your assets. And if you'll notice, your assets now are 1.2 on option 2, where on option 1, they were about $800,000. The reason that this is more, because it gives you the availability of having the whole building, all of the assets. Option 1 does not allow that.
So you're talking about the scrap metal?
It's scrap metal, the generators, pumps, turbines, anything else of scrap value that's in there. Option 1, you cannot do that because you have all of the transmission and distribution intact within the building.
So the estimated value of $3.5 million, that's what it's going to cost to build?
That's the approximate cost to build a switch yard on the current site, a control house, and relocate all your transmission, all your distribution, all your SCADA points, all your DC circuitry, and everything to the outside.
So you're looking at a net cost of $2.3 million.
Excuse me. How do you go about finding a buyer for this equipment, like especially generators?
We've already been contacted with companies for that, and I've been working with the purchasing department to go ahead and we'd have to put out a scope of work, whatever you give me the direction to move forward, how we're going to do it. That would be the next step, is to put out a scope of work and find a company that comes in and get the best price for our buck. So to answer your question, we already got that in the works.
Process,
That's correct. Okay, so once you build your control house, get rid of your assets, you start the demolition of the building and all the outside support facilities. That estimated value is 9.9. Now, I will tell you, and Lloyd from Power Services is here to answer any questions on that because he did the original study. That number could be a low of $5 million. It could be a high of 9.9. It just depends on what hazardous chemicals, as far as asbestos and all that you run into during your demolition. As you know, Fort Pierce had quite a bit of problems with this.
Well, don't we know how much asbestos is in the building already?
We do not have a record of that. I mean, we have a record, but as far as the hazardous, the tear down, we do not have that number as far as what they may run into.
You say estimated value, you mean estimated cost?
Yeah. Is that really the cost?
That would be on the high end, like I said.
No, but you're talking of cost.
That is the cost.
Yeah.
Cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So bullet point 1 and bullet point 3 are cost, and bullet point 2 might be a revenue.
Revenue.
Correct?
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I'm sure this is what you would like to see, is all green space. But this is your option 3, okay, where we talk about everything is completely removed from the property and it's all green space. So on option 3, with it being all green space, you need to acquire a new site for the construction and relocation of the existing transmission and distribution facilities that are right there. And keep in mind that you have to be, the closer you are to wherever the existing transmission and distribution facilities are, the cheaper your price is. The further you go away from that site, the more it will drive your cost up.
So it could move across the street.
It could move to across the street. If you're referring to the post office annex, I guess, I mean, that was an option way back when we were discussing with FP&L. And I believe I have that in. That price was about $8 million to relocate. Am I right, Jim?
But it was a while back.
Yeah, you're correct. That was a while back. So, and that's why I have here the estimated relocation cost is unknown, because I really, until such time that I can determine where the site is going to be, once I can identify where the site is going to be, then that would give me a way to come up with a cost.
Well, are there any other sites other than across the street, realistically?
There was a site on 18th Street when FP&L was in discussion with us.
18th and where?
18th, just west of the boulevard. Okay. But at this point, I think the development is already geared back up because the economy turned around. So I don't believe that site is available anymore. I don't know. Do you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
They've renewed their application.
Okay.
And to move it like to the airport or something is just out of the question.
I already have one that's
Okay.
You need to be on these transmission lines.
Okay.
Yeah, because of that ring bus, that's where your cost is really driven up. So the closer you are to that approximate site, I mean, the better off you are.
Is there any usable ground across the street where the sewer facility is?
You sailing. No, there's not enough land over there to put in a substation of this size that we would need. And just as a comment, also to let you know, we are proceeding with option 1 under this scenario, which is, in my opinion, the most cost-effective initially, but could lead into the other 2 options if you wish to do that, to pursue that at some time in the future.
Okay, so today I'm just asking for the direction to move forward, and what Jim just discussed about option 1, that's what him and I discussed, and that right now that's your immediate cost savings to move forward to allow for the demolition of the building and new control house in the future. So here's your option 1, there's your option 2, and there's your option 3.
So let me just make sure I understand. So option 1 is just going to leave the control facilities inside of Big Blue and move things back.
To answer your question, option 1, what you see is in the upper left-hand corner, you are correct. All of your transmission and distribution facilities that are located within inside that building, all that would stay.
But did option 1 include, so it's sort of
right, it did include
surplus extra stuff you don't need?
That is
800,000.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah.
It's not registered.
I think, if I remember your slide correctly, it was about $800,000 worth of surplus that we could sell.
That's correct, and it was 1.2 in option 2.
But did option 1 also include making ready for some other usage, the back part of the property, the riverfront part of the property?
What we talked about in option 1, you are correct. I mean, you would sell off whatever assets that you have available in the building, i.e. generators, the turbines, and all that. Right. Tearing down the cooling tower, removing the tanks and the oil and the lines and all the oil pipes and all that stuff, right? Okay. Kind of beautifying the lagoon frontage.
Okay. So then what was the cost of all
But you would have to keep the building just to maintain the control room? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Because all, like I said, your transmission, your distribution, all of your DC circuitry, all of the other components that tie into the actual outside components are located within inside that building.
So there'd still be an ongoing maintenance charge to maintain the building over...
It's kind of like step 1, isn't it?
Right. I mean, if you look at it this way, if you go with option 1 and sell off all your available assets that you have available and take that money to set aside for what you budget for, maybe the following year to build a control house, and then maybe budget the following year for the bring down of the building, I mean, that's...
So your options are really phases. In other words, you're foreseeing that we start off with what you call option one, is really the first part of the process. Then option two is a further reduction by building a separate controlled system, which frees up more of the building. And then phase three so these are really not options; they're phases of a continuous process.
That's correct.
Well, but option 2, 3, correct me if I'm wrong, is a little bit of a fork in the road. Before you would sink the money into building a new control building on the site, you'd probably want to make the decision as to whether you really want to do that or whether you want total green space and you want to move the controls to another site. Is that more accurate? Yeah.
You're correct.
Right.
Option 1 is, you're right. It's getting, you can do either one of those things after option 1. It's just kind of getting ready for those. But when you get to option 2, 3, the question really becomes, do you want anything on that site at all, or do you want just the control facility on that site with everything in the back clear?
So where would that option 2 building sit on this green space that you're showing here? I mean,
Option 1 or option 2?
no, I'm assuming you're going with option 1 and towards option 2. If we go to option
Correct. So if you look at option 2, which is, you see that's actually the Piper substation, 30 by 60 brick block house. That I would anticipate, until such time we actually went with a consultant and came, I would say it would be just in between the building and the 69 ring bus there. So it would just be to the east of the 69 ring bus and just to the west of the distribution transformers.
But on this slide, you've got basically an odd-shaped rectangle. Whereabouts?
Which one are you looking at?
The green space.
The green
slide.
space.
Okay.
Where would the rectangle with the new control building, where would that sit in that rectangle? I mean, are we talking to one side, in the middle? I mean, where would be the optimal place to put it?
It would actually be almost in the middle, closer to, I'm not sure how many feet off of the boulevard it is want to say probably, Ralph, do you know, probably about 800-900 feet. Does that sound right?
I'd say a couple hundred.
Okay.
So, looking at it, it's on the left side near the boulevard and middle.
About in the middle, yes, sir.
And setback, how far? Would it be as close?
200 to 300 feet, probably.
So,
I think what we're trying to do is to we're
option is not going to be there.
correct, but I think what we're trying to do is
I think he's trying to visualize
how
what it's
that
going to
would
look like if you just had a
under
switch
option
yard
2.
and all green space.
Yes, right.
Oh, you know
Do you
what?
have a laser pointer? No.
Might be one in
I
the
do
drawer.
not unless there's
It
one
won't
up
show
there.
on
Oh, it
your
won't
screen.
But you know what I could do for you,
Arrow.
and I can do this before we go to the next, was that Finance Commission on Thursday, and I can get this probably to you within the next day or so, if time allows, is I can take that option 3, and I can visually put that substation, kind of what it would look like and where it would be, so you can visually kind of, would that help you?
Yes.
See that?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope when either options 2 or 3 that we're not in any rush to do these things. We got to really do the analysis and get some hard numbers. These are extremely rough numbers, which, you know, because you're looking at a lot of costs about demolishing buildings, and everything I know about demolishing buildings, when you go to demolish them, you always find more problems than you thought you had.
Bobby, you're exactly right.
As much.
And phase 2 and 3 are going to really take a lot of community discussion because, for example, in Fort Pierce, they got themselves in a world of trouble in the fact that they said they were going to clean up to a standard that is just, they've $11 million into it now. So when you set that standard of what this cleanup will be, is what you're doing is you're starting to set a level of cost of demolition of that building. You know, part of the concept we had with Florida Power and Light, well, me primarily, but I said that if we take the building down, what we ought to do is take it down to the slab, put about 6 inches of dirt on top of it, and it becomes a recreational facility, and life goes on. But once you start tapping into that or whatever else that you may want to do, we show no indication that we have any environmental problems on this site at all. Nothing. But there's not a site in America that I don't think somebody can't dig something up.
Right.
And so those are the issues, and I think as a community, that's why we're saying phase one, and I think you're correct. We were calling it options 1, 2, and 3, but it really is a phase one. Then phase two comes back, because that substation, it's just a function of money. We could put it to the north or south of that site. We can put it in the far back, wherever anybody wants to put it. I mean, it's going to be a substation. Or you can put it on a site across the street or somewhere else. But what makes that key decision is how much money are you willing to spend to do that. We need to be near transmission lines.
I mean,
also the decision is going to be, what do you foresee the purpose of this green space? I mean, is it going to be a park? Is it going to be a condo? Is it going to be a marina? I don't know. I mean, if the city has to decide what it plans to do before you can decide how much cleanup is warranted. I mean, if you're going to sell it to some outside party, they might have
Can't
them.
be sold.
At the referendum.
Referendum.
Well,
Yeah, it could be sold.
It could be
at
sold.
referendum,
I'm
that's true.
assuming you can always sell something. I mean, there's some ways of getting. But the thing is, what does the city see as the highest and best value to it of this property? It's a pretty substantial piece of property.
And we're going through that exercise now. For example, November the 30th, we will have another public hearing where we're trying to encourage the citizens to come in and give options as to what they would envision on the site. The chairman of the Recreation Commission is heading that effort up, and I think he has one scheduled for November the 30th, one in January, that he will have other discussions on that. Because you're right. I mean, to me, that's going to be a very in-depth discussion. Using Fort Pierce again as an example, they just turned it over to the CRA, and so the CRA made their decision. In our particular case, it's going to be the community in general as to how that decision's made. We're going to be able to produce what the cost of those options will be, and as we move forward, people will say that we're willing to spend this or we're not willing to spend it. But I think we have a very good plan going forward for the short term, and i.e. retaining the substation that we do need, and that is a major part of our backbone of our system. So we've got to have a substation in that location or in that general vicinity. And we think it's going to be minimal maintenance. Somebody talked about maintenance on the building. We will have that, but it's going to be a cost. It'd be a little higher, but it'll be the same cost if we have to build one of the buildings there for the operation and control room. So you're going to have that issue. We're hoping on that sale of the materials out of there, we can't have anybody come in there and structurally damage the building and all that other good stuff. So it's going to be a little more temperamental versus if you're going to take the whole building down, they could go in and take whatever it is that is available. So.
Yeah, I would suggest you relabel this PowerPoint and say phase one, which is your option one, and then phase two, options 2 and 3. I think you reduce some citizen angst there, because you're going to do one. It sounds to me like you're going to do one regardless, and then 2 and 3 requires a hell of a lot of discussion on the part of everybody. So that would be a suggestion.
Okay, thank you. I will do that.
Yeah.
And also, Ted, you can do that drawing that you were thinking about doing as well.
Okay.
I think that drawing would be really helpful for that 30th meeting.
Okay, I can do that.
And I don't know that I'm clear on the cost of the first phase. I know that you said you could sell the equipment for $800,000, but I don't know what the cost was to clear up the back of the property. Was that mentioned?
I believe.
Was that part of phase one?
No.
No. Okay.
Was that in phase one, Lloyd? The $800,000 for the selling of the assets and the cleanup of the back property? Right.
Well, Lloyd Shank, Power Services Incorporated. Naturally, both the $800,000 for phase one salvage value is an estimate. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty low estimate. It's based on today's costs of copper and salvageable metals. If the tanks can be salvaged
then yes, I would recommend that the conditions be that that site be cleaned up. The cooling tower is just wood, and there's probably very, very little salvageable material there. So there would be a cost associated with it.
So that's not included in the discussion about
No.
phase one. At this point, we're just talking about what's the expedient thing to do, which
No,
is.
but I don't believe there's too much below ground under the cooling tower, so it would, if you can get the cooling tower down pretty economically, I don't think it would be too much to clean it up.
You're saying actually there could be a phase 1 and a 1A?
Or just as a comment, what we would be doing is taking our net proceeds from the salvage of materials and investing that in the demolition of the tanks and of the cooling tower. We expect that to be a positive to our site. For example, we have oil in one of those tanks. The last time we did the oil, it was below the book value that we had, but we received a proceed somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million, as I recall.
And we'll have the same situation. And they hate it when I become an accountant, but I'm going to do it for just a second. You're right. We ended up having a positive cash influx, but a net book loss, and that will be the same situation again. The assets that we're talking about selling for maybe $800,000 have a book value of almost $2 million. So we'll receive an influx of cash that we can use to pay for some of the things, but in that particular year's financial statements, it's going to be a book loss, even though a cash benefit. So
Aren't those assets fully depreciated by now?
These are inventory assets. We're talking about some of them.
Well, I mean, oil, yes, but equipment and
some of them are. But remember, some of them we put some major money into over the last couple of years, and we did improvements substantial enough to be capitalized because they extended the useful life of the assets. And so, yeah, some of them are fully depreciated, but some of them just took on another couple, $3, $4, $5 million worth of cost in the last couple of years. And then some of what they're talking about is inventory, which is not depreciated, and we don't write inventory down to market value. So.
But we feel like, again, we're using a lot of our information coming from Fort Pierce and their experience. And when Tom was here, he and I had a lot of those conversations along with Ted as to what we could do. And the key is we do not think by the demolition and hopefully there'll be some salvageable value out of the oil tanks, but there's a lot of cleanup. When you take the oil out, for example, the one that we did empty, we had a lot of cleaning that had to take place in that tank itself in order to facilitate. But again, at the end of the day, by the time we sold the asset and had the work done, it was a zero-sum game for us.
So what's your best guess in terms of when you take the value of these assets, the oil and so forth, versus the demolition that needs to be done in this phase 1, option 1? Are we going to break even, or are we going to end up having to expend money?
I think we'll have money in the bank.
All right.
That's my opinion.
Oil prices are a little bit different than they were the first time we did this, too.
But it depends on if you're talking auditor or an accountant. I'm more of a cash guy. She's the book guy.
I'm a big fan of cash.
Oh, I'm
a big fan of cash.
All the other costs are sunk costs. So whatever happened, that's life in a big city. I'm more interested in cash flow.
Yeah, and Bob, I think at the end of the day, we will be able to get those down and get those tanks out of there, and it'll be little or no cost to us.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
That's what I'm banking on anyway.
All right.
So I guess today what I need from you is just a vote to move forward if you're going to go and present it to the Finance Commission for option 1, or which will now be called phase 1.
I'll make a motion that the Utility Commission recommend that the city's utility go forward with phase 1 of the plant shutdown.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
4-1. 4-0. Mark, did you want to make a public comment?
Yes, please. Mark Mucher again. I had something before Ted's presentation, but since it's fresh in my mind, this option 3 business, I recall when we discussed option 3 with Florida Power and Light, they may still have called it a relocation, but it wasn't a relocation. They were going to build a new substation and then flip the switch and then salvage the old substation. So I think that's probably still the case if we were to do that. And whether we can afford to do that or not, nobody knows. But I would suggest that we don't call it a relocation because we're not taking the electrical components and moving them. That hopefully we're upgrading the technology. Florida Power and Light has newer technologies in its substations than we do, and so that's just semantics, I guess. But let me see, what were we talking about before this presentation? Oh, I know. Cindy's. I wanted to understand what Cindy was saying. Are you saying that the $3.5 million worth of gas that we're going to have to buy almost immediately for shutting down Big Blue was already in that $2.50 a month rate estimate? See, we didn't get to look into the spreadsheets
Yes.
to drill into some of that stuff.
Yes. The analysis that was presented of the overall rates based on the revised OUC PPA included as a subset this shutdown of the plant with residual costs going forward into next fiscal year, the first full fiscal year of about $830,000 of pension costs and things we can't get rid of. So the rate trajectory that you saw on the presentation you had from Mr. Harrington and Mr. Wright included exactly this analysis. It was part of it. So it included the offset of shutting down the plant and getting rid of all those costs versus the new costs of purchase power for that net, whatever it was. The $2.50 was part of that, and any further rate reductions that would come along between, I think in his chart it showed more like towards October of next year, because that was when we thought we were going to be fully shut down, may possibly come along sooner.
Okay, well, maybe it's just my curiosity, and maybe you all don't need this, but I would rather see the effect of rates, or the new contract on one hand, and then the effect of shutting down Big Blue separate. But now it looks like all we're looking at is a blended thing. Is it possible to separate them, or is there any use in separating them?
I don't know that there's any use in separating them, because as we moved forward, they went together. I mean, the idea, in other words, if you wouldn't continue to help me if you want to, you wouldn't continue to operate the power plant if part of your new OUC PPA was to buy peaking capacity from them. Why would you continue to operate the plant? So they kind of are intertwined. I don't think we would make the separate decision to continue to operate the plant based on the PPA we signed. And that's but in answer to your question, that's the reason that this analysis of the cost savings from shutting down the plant was part of the costs that were in the mix with the presentation of what the rate trajectory would be.
Okay, well, I attended all the meetings and I studied all the documents as best I could, and maybe Bob can help me here, but I didn't understand that 250 took into consideration the costs of shutting down the plant or the costs of the oil, the power. But, okay, well, I missed that. Yeah. But I guess I'd like to see, just out of curiosity, if Chef negotiated us $10 lower in rates and it costs $750 to shut down the plant, or vice versa. That whatever netted out to $250, if that's the case. If that's the full, that's the full financial analysis. I don't know that we have.
That is the analysis that was provided. If you looked at, and I may have it with me. Let me see if I do.
But at the time that was done, that included keeping Unit 5 up
If you looked at, and I think there were several of them like this, if you look at this analysis, you'll see in there the operating and maintenance costs and the city costs in addition to the various contracts. And so if you look at the city costs that are in the existing case, which is the right down in here, the 4+ million for city O&M costs for the power plant, as well as the capital renewal and replacement. If you looked at the next chart that they showed with the alternative case, you'll actually see right down here, Vero Beach Plant O&M, that $2,956,268 is exactly the number that you see in this analysis for what the power cost would be, $2,956,268. So I guess what I'm saying is this shutdown of the plant and this reduction of costs is in one line down here, part and parcel of the analysis that was provided for the detail that was provided for the analysis for the revision to the contract. You'll see right down here, Vero Beach Plant O&M, $2,956,268, and then moving forward in future fiscal years, that $832,000 in residual costs. So it was, I guess no better way to explain it, a subset of the entire analysis of where rates were going.
Okay, and the fact that we shut down a month early doesn't really materially affect that $2.50 rate.
It doesn't materially affect the end point. It may accelerate getting there, I guess is the best way of putting it. Mm-hmm. You know, the 16-17 numbers remain the same. The transition period between now and the 16-17 numbers, it may come sooner. It won't affect the end point, but it may
we're going to still
sooner.
Look at the cash flows quarterly and the rate sufficiency and all that.
That's one of the things that, yes, and we have actually gotten PRMG back to reinvigorate that rate study to fold whatever really transpires over the next 3 months into it so that when we come, end of first quarter of next year to finalize that new rate filing, it'll incorporate whatever really happened in our costs in the next 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
As it actually unfolds, because at this point there are still other, things that have to be worked through.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help at all, Mark? Or?
Mark, the answer to the question is Cindy and I have to see the bills to be believers.
Sure.
We've seen the analysis. When we get the bill in, that's when we will be believers.
Me too. Thanks.
May I?
Go ahead.
Okay, at the risk of exposing my ignorance about utility business, I have a general question to ask, and I'm looking at this. You're familiar, right? Okay.
What is that you're?
Oh, it is the residential bill comparison statewide.
That's at publicpower.com, right?
At FMEA or yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So here's my question. I understand the power costs, the fuel adjustment power costs, but I'm trying to understand now. Why does the base rate for all these utilities vary so greatly? Can you explain to me what makes our base rate?
Sure. Hold that up for me again. Do they have 3 components or just 2?
2.
So the reason they vary kind of back and forth a little bit is rate structure issue. Base rates sometimes incorporate just like fixed costs of rendering bills. Sometimes people choose to put into their base rate, additional costs that are maybe a little more variable in nature so that they can achieve a different rate structure, a different incentive, a different split. I mean, it is just so dependent on many decisions about rate structure, I guess is the simplest way to put it. I mean, sometimes, if you remember when we had the consultant in last spring, right now the city's cost of purchase power is not full recovery of its cost of purchase power, and yet over here in the base energy costs we're actually over recovering, and at the bottom line we're in good shape, but actually the purchase power cost is not great enough to recover all the purchase power, and there's some of it inherently happening in the base rate. Sometimes that happens over time like ours did. Some people do that intentionally for a variety of reasons having to do with the application of utility taxes.
We were going to correct that, right?
We had proposed to correct it by actually in just saying that there was a certain dollar amount of it that was inherent in the energy costs and leaving the rest in purchase power. When we do this rate study in the spring, we'll be having exactly that conversation. So we'll have the opportunity to talk with our rate consultants about what the appropriate levels of the components of the bills are, and every time you change them, you change the impact on some class of customer. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Every rate structure is about you've got you've got total costs, and you're trying to divvy them up. And every time you squeeze one side, it comes out somewhere else. And so rate structure is really that balancing act of having, what you consider to be the most fair impact across all of your customer classes. That's probably it in a nutshell. And everybody makes that decision differently, and therefore you see everyone has, a different structure between power costs and base rates.
I would just say, as a general principle for transparency, we should really be able to break out the fixed costs versus the variable costs, which are primarily the purchase power. That way, that's the ultimate clarity in terms of the customer seeing what's going on. It makes it easier to judge how the utility is doing from a performance perspective.
And there actually are 3 components to cost. There are not just 2. And so that's why I'm not sure how they've lumped them together. But there is truly your fixed base rate monthly, your energy costs monthly, which have to do with the city's O&M and administrative cost side, and then the cost of purchase power through our providers. Again, this is something that is inherent in that rate study, and it's a conversation that we'll be having. We already had some of it in this past spring when our consultant presented to you, their analysis of where we stood right now and some things we might do to modify the rate structure. So there are decisions to be made there for sure.
And Judy, come back. A lot of it is the flexibility of what goes into those. If you'll notice, some cities, I think there's one of them doesn't even have a fuel component. It's total based. And in their mind, I'm sure that went into that when people were having fits over fuel adjustment charges. Well, the easy way to resolve that is you just make it all one.
Make it disappear.
Yeah, make it disappear. And in our case, we still get the calls that said the price of gas at the tank is going down. Why is our fuel component? So we're going to call it purchase power, which is what it is. It's what we purchase power. It's all inclusive. It is not fuel. We will not be directly buying fuel. So we're trying to clarify ours, but it is one of those issues that come up periodically in virtually every city, really every utility, because when they go to the Public Service Commission, they also work on those components as well. So it is very confusing when you're trying to compare that. I think what Cindy said is you squeeze the bottom and the top gets higher, so it's just the nature of the beast. Full recovery of cost. As Cindy reminds me on a regular basis, we've got to have enough money at the end of the day to pay the bills, so you've got to have cost recovery.
Mark Mucher again. And I don't know whether I've said this in front of this board or not, but I say it to City Council all the time. You can't trust that stuff from Barry Moline farther than you can throw it. If you look at it this month, they have, I believe it's Stark, some teeny tiny little utility somewhere is the lowest cost in the state. And, on one page, that's the big headline. Lowest cost in the state, Stark, $74. The fact is, last month they had an energy charge of $44, or a purchase fuel cost, or whatever you call it, of $44. This month it's 44 cents. It's clearly a typo, but they don't care. They'll take that and say that a muni has power for $74. Well, I'd love to see the bill to back that up, and it's just not true. And then the other thing is that the averages are useless, because they'll take the investor-owned utility in Amelia Island at $130 and unweighted average it with Florida Power and Light at $74 and say the average is $115 or whatever the numbers are. So unless you weight the averages, unless you take 4.7 million customers at $94 and 2,000 customers at $130 and weight the averages, those averages mean nothing. So don't pay any attention to municipal averages or investor-owned averages or the comparison between the two. They just play these numbers games to make munis look good, and it's just totally dishonest. Thank you.
Thank you. Any old business from the members of the?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment on what Mr. Mushman said.
there are 2.1 million customers in investor utilities, which are not only the Gulf that Mr. Mucci referred to, but also Duke Power. Duke Power has 1.7 million customers. Their rate is $118.55. To be sure, there's 400,000 others who average $130. So to say that the averages don't count, these are not weighted averages, these are the actual numbers. So you do have those utilities, which are investor-owned, that have higher rates. And in the aggregate, those 2.1 million have higher rates than the city of Vero Beach. Average loaded rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on.
Mark Mucher again. I hate to have a debate here, but let me just clarify.
Excuse me.
I have a point of order.
I don't want to have a debate.
I have a point of order about what the public comment section is, and is it at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, is it continuously?
We've allowed to have it during a topic discussion, and we've finished the topic discussion, so I think it's time to close public comment. Thank you. Chairman's matters, I have none. Members, do you have any?
Yes, I have a member's matter. The Airport Commission had a meeting last week. 3 members of this commission attended as in their role as public citizens, not as members of this commission. And what came up was there was a discussion as part of the airport developmental plan. I may not have the exact terminology for that. Going forward, there was one proposal for a solar farm, and there was a gentleman from Con Ed Solutions, Craig Fisher, that gave a presentation, and the PowerPoint presentation went out. And, personally, I'm in favor of renewable power. But I think one thing, and I mentioned in the meeting, again, commenting as a public citizen during that meeting, is I think this commission needs to be involved very quickly. My concern is that we've already, with the OUC contract, taken on a take-or-pay obligation. And if there's a solar farm there, usually the way those purchase power agreements work is it's a take-or-pay obligation. Otherwise, nobody's going to set up the solar farm. So I guess my question is, has there been any estimates as the amount of power production that if one of these goes through, and I guess there was 3 different sites, one had anywhere between 37 and 69 acres, how much additional power potentially that the utility would be required to buy?
First of all, there is a consultant's work that's being done on behalf of Con Ed, so they are doing that research and looking at it. And this will be a phase-in, as we understand, over about a 10-year period, so it will exceed the time of our contract with OUC. But initially, there's going to be about 7 megawatts. There is not a requirement of a take or pay of the city. They have to sign a contract with us in order to make that happen. So therefore, they have to make their prices competitive with what we're buying on the market. We are not required. Somebody can't just go out and set up a solar farm and come to the city of Vero Beach and say you're going to pay twice as much for it. Now,
right,
they do have the right, and we would provide at a cost to use our substation out there where it could get it out on the market. And there could be, for example, Florida Power and Light or someone else that may be able to get tax credits for renewable resources. And we would allow for that to happen, and then they become what could be a merchant farm or something and use their megawatts. We like renewables as well, and if it's advantageous to us, if we can get it at market price, then we would be more than willing to purchase the renewables, because I think we can incentivize, and especially if in fact what I'm being told is that first initial stage would be like 7 megawatts and phased in over a 10-year period. By the time it got phased in, our OUC contract would be either up for renewal negotiations or we would be out with an RFP, and then that solar farm could definitely bid on any type of request for proposals we would have out on the market. But 7 megawatts in the scheme of things is a pretty small number.
But I understand that there are other proposals out there. I believe the county commission is looking at putting solar roofs on all the schools and possibly parking lots. I mean, that's a different animal too. I mean, do we know of other major projects that are likely to come through because they're going to affect our usage also, or our commitments?
Well, coming through and going through the process of doing, people just don't go out and put a solar farm up. Now, we have meters right now that are reversible because we have customers that actually have solar panels on. But if there is a proliferation, let's say that 40% of our customers all decide that they're going to put solar panels in their backyard, we have the right to recover our costs for infrastructure. So you have capacity charges similar to what we pay. As of today, I don't know anyone, I'll take that back. There are people that live off the grid, and they're probably somewhere in Florida as well, in Alaska or wherever.
We have one customer out of 15 or 20 that actually have net solar meters, and we have one that hasn't paid the city, that is actually off the grid. The rest of them seasonally end up paying as often as they take.
And that may be that we have to readjust our rate structure in order to accommodate what our costs are. Because typically speaking, and let's take schools, schools are not, in my opinion, going to invest in solar panels plus the battery capacity to be able to go off the grid to run that school. Because on a cloudy day, those folks could have a problem, and they have a bunch of people running around in a school building. And so they're going to have to pay us in order to give them the capacity and the standby and the backup to whatever they put on the building, which we're ready to do, and I think that we can accommodate. But I think in the school systems, from what I've heard, and I was not in attendance of that energy thing, but a lot of what the schools are trying to accomplish are buying equipment that's a little more modernized and much more efficient. You have schools here that have boilers in there that, well, let's don't use the schools. Let's use the hospital as one. When their air conditioning went out, that wasn't an electric issue. That was a water issue. And that's because they had a very inefficient stream of mechanical systems. And so hopefully, people will update those. And we would want to encourage the schools to do that.
I understand, but what I'm saying, though, is that whereas surely we can see that, as you say, net metering recovers some of our costs, but it also means that we supply less power overall to our grid. And so our commitment to OUC to take a certain amount of power becomes more of a risk to us because we're simply not going to be providing that much or using that much power.
But the good thing about the risk, it's limited in number of years, 8 years at the max. And so therefore, this conversion that you're going to see throughout our community is going to take some time, and it'll minimize that. So I don't think our exposure is really that great, or it's something we can't handle.
I would have to agree. I mean, I think that we're talking about the time frame in which any significant amount of this would come to pass is, I think, a bit longer than you think. There's a long distance between talking about putting a solar farm on the roof of a public building and actually affording it and making it come to pass. And it would take a pretty big shift and pretty quickly in that demographic for it to really have a real risk to our overall costs, particularly considering that we can adjust our rates for standby charges, et cetera. So certainly I would agree it's something to keep an eye on, but I personally don't think it's anything to get particularly worried about at this juncture in terms of the next 9 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you the gentleman from Con Ed Energy Solutions wants to get that solar farm up by the end of 2016 because there's a federal energy investment tax credit which expires, and he thinks he can do it.
Yeah, and he does. And we are working with him at the airport as part of our land use provisions, and Ted's been discussing it with them as well as to the way that farm would come on online. And again, we can accommodate if they wanted to go to market, that would be fine. But again, we're not required to take energy at a loss as it stands today, subject to change by federal legislation, I guess.
And so along the same lines of the whole solar conversation, wasn't there an issue we were supposed to address relevant to FMPA's solar initiative?
Yes, Randy Old attended their meeting, and FMPA is looking into a solar initiative as well and asking cities if they're interested in getting into that solar initiative with FMPA. And it just came up last week, I think. I wasn't in attendance at that meeting, but they were asking if there was any interest in cities in doing and exploring solar
So my
farms.
understanding is that we could, go along with them for a while so that we could learn about the process and just gain an understanding without making a commitment. Is that correct?
That is correct. The only thing that FMPA is asking at this stage is a show of interest that they would even have their staff start pursuing solar as sort of an initiative. They're not asking for any commitments or anything at this point.
And was there anything needed from our group, the utility commission?
Well, I think that from Randy's would like to have direction from the Utility Commission as to if we should pursue that. The problem I have is that I don't have any backup materials that I've received from them to give to you.
We need to have that as an agenda item.
I think I, for one, have to get a little more information on that, and I think Randy will get that as he attends these meetings, and then we'll flush it out with you guys as we go forward. I just don't have any documentation of that.
But at this point, it doesn't really take any commitment from the part of the city other than say, yeah, show me.
That is correct. Right now, I think what is happening in FMPA, and again, I wasn't at the meeting, is that the staff has talked to some folks about solar energy, and they have said, well, you could pursue it under this scenario, but you've got to have to see if there's any city that's even interested in saying to FMPA, we want you to pursue solar energy. And that's what they're asking. Do we want, as a city and a member of the board, want to pursue solar energy as an option? But again, I will try to get as much information as I can. We'll get that out to you.
Thank you, Jim. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make the motion.
Second. We're adjourned.
Okay.